India set to ratify global conventions to combat child labor. India is set to ratify 2 key global conventions on combating child labor, which a top UN official described as a great step forward in bringing all the world's children under the ambit of the legislations. International Labour Organization (ILO) Director General Ryder, in his statement for World Day Against Child Labor, marked annually on June 12, said ILO's Minimum Age Convention, 1973, No. 138, and the Worst Forms of Child Labor Convention, 1999, No. 182, have now been ratified by 169 and 182 member states respectively. Tomorrow, June 13, I will have the honor of receiving India's ratification of both the conventions. That great step forward towards universal ratification will mean that almost all children in the world will be covered by Convention 182, and the coverage of Convention 138 will leap from 60% to 80%. Ryder said in a statement issued on Monday. Together with the near-universal ratification of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, that sends a resounding message about our common cause, and our common standards that protect children's human rights, he added. The government of India had in March this year approved ratification of 2 fundamental conventions of the ILO to address concerns related to child labor. With the ratification, India would join majority of countries that have adopted the legislation to prohibit and place severe restrictions on the employment and work of children. Nobel laureate Kailash Satyarthi had said that India's decision for ratification of Convention 182 and Convention 138 was long overdue in providing justice to the country's children after the total prohibition of child labor. This is yet another important step in protecting all our children from exploitation and abuse. It now remains a collective responsibility of everyone to do their bit to remove the scourge of child labor from the country, Satyarthi had said. The ILO said children in areas affected by conflict and disasters are among the most vulnerable, making a strong call for an end to the scourge, especially as children trapped in crises risk falling prey to trafficking or being forced into hazardous work. All children have the right to be protected from child labor. Yet, around the world, there are still 168 million children in child labor. 85 million of them are engaged in hazardous work, Ryder said. A significant portion these children find themselves undertaking dangerous work, living in areas affected by conflict and disaster, and they are the focus of the 2017 commemoration of the World Day Against Child Labor. As the world strives to achieve the elimination of child labor by 2025, the UN underlined that conflicts and disasters have a devastating impact on people's lives. They kill, maim, injure and force people to flee their homes, destroy livelihoods, push people into poverty and starvation, and trap many in situations without basic safeguard for their rights. The UN said the first to suffer from human rights violations and abuses are often boys and girls. Their schools are destroyed and basic services are disrupted, and many children are internally displaced to become refugees in other countries, and are particularly vulnerable to trafficking and child labor. Today, we are facing the greatest refugee crisis for decades, said Ryder, referring to one of the main drivers of child labor. Globally, over 1.5 billion people live in countries that are affected by conflict, violence and fragility. At the same time, around 200 million people are affected by disasters every year, while a huge part of the world's responsibility to provide sanctuary and support to children and their families is shouldered by neighboring host countries. ILO's Director General says much more needs to be done to share fairly the responsibility to protect refugees. Ryder particularly asked support to those states on the front line in the affected regions, so that they can provide access to the labor market for adult refugees and access to education for their children.